Hello, my name is Susie Sleeps, and this is Sophisticated Emotional Technology, a look into the ideas of my stepfather and outsider artist, February Montaine. This episode is all about using fiction to inspect reality. Here's a note from February's memoirs titled Fractal Self-Investigation. Fractal. Noun. A curve or geometrical figure, each part of which has the same statistical character as the whole. They are useful in modelling structures, such as snowflakes, in which similar patterns recur at progressively smaller scales, and in describing partly random phenomena such as crystal growth and galaxy formation. This to me describes more than geometry or nature. It describes a way and observing and dividing parts of my notions of self. Ever since realising my imaginary friends were not made by the world but made by myself, I've played with this technique, creating and then later casting versions of myself to act as makeshift guides. It is only now I see how this process was fractal. By creating a self-similar replication of aspects of myself, I set a version of the future free that I might not have seen beforehand. If you can create characters that act out each facet of your psyche, you can eventually close the circle of fractals and technically end it where you started. When applying fractal dimensionality to the conscious, you can quite quickly fall down the rabbit hole. It's fairly obvious that rabbit holes themselves are built on fractal principles. My personality is a recursive process. I'm made of many versions of myself, self-replicating over time. Whilst I don't have complete control over all the parameters, especially when I'm casting a stranger to play a part of myself, I can still get a course and watch them shape my future. When used correctly, you can spiral into any given future, letting the self free. Think not of what you see, but what it took to produce what you see. Over to our co-host Sam Potter in the studio. Thank you.
February Montaine talks of using fiction to inspect reality. He did this through splitting up his psyche into distinct characters and then made art with them to surf the self. Today I'm joined by two artists who have took these methods and applied them to the long-term relationship they once had. Anna B. Savage and Jem Talbot have since made a film about this time, using their creative process to examine what exactly happened. They soon discovered memory has a strange way of shaping the truth. Hello, Anna. Hello, Jem.
Hello. Hi, Sam.
It sounds like you've been on quite a journey together.
Yes, that would be a fair assumption.
Assumption is the word, is it not?
I mean, we first met when we were how old? 16, or maybe younger actually, 15, and then sort of had a relationship whilst we were at the same school, and it was a first relationship and a relationship of like lots of firsts, and because of that, I guess quite a powerful one. And then we broke up in our early 20s and then didn't speak to each other for 7-8 years, and then sort of reconnected and decided to make a film. So yeah. Okay, so cool. That's just how the journey begins.
Could you tell me about the process of making the film?
So I had a dream about Jem where I was with him in a pub garden, and I gave him a hug and I was like, oh, it's really nice to see you. By the way, the exhaust pipe has fallen off my car, which I think was my way of being like, I can drive now. So when I woke up in the morning, I was like, oh, I'm gonna text him. And I texted Jem just saying like, hello, had this dream about you. And it just kind of, I woke up feeling quite nice and warm from it, and thought I'd like extend some of that your way. And Jem replied like really quickly, being like, that's really nice, let's go for a drink. And I was a bit shocked, but I was open to it. So we went for a drink, and then and had a really nice like couple of hours where it just felt like chatting to like, you know, your old best mate. Oh my God. And then after that, Jem, I can't remember exactly what I was doing. I was doing a course of some sort, and Jem called me and was like, hey, it was like a couple of days after we'd gone for a drink, and he was like, oh, hey, I've got this idea. Can I like run it past you? And then he basically ran the idea of making a film past me.
Yeah. And I'd heard basically, and that was elicited because I'd heard Anna's EP, and sort of kind of in a sort of strange way, the way the writing, especially in that EP, struck a chord with me. It was something kind of, it was almost like a musical form of something I was trying to achieve in the work or something I was trying to achieve in the work I was making, which was, I guess, most reductively speaking, is like really open, authentic, sort of portrayal of self within the music. And I think if anyone were to listen to Anna's music, one of the first things they'd say about the lyrics is that it's sort of brutally honest. And I'd been, something that had been swirling around my head a lot of the time was using identity in films and using self-identity. So yeah, that was kind of the meeting point, in terms of the meeting point physically for us, reconnecting, then a meeting point in terms of what we wanted to achieve in our work, I think, a little bit. Yeah.
So you are, in terms of what you're doing, it is a kind of, it is an expose of your pasts. It's a chance for you two to get together, run through your memories, and then using the art of filmmaking to create this kind of test bed where you can see what the actual truth of the situation was?
A little bit. I mean, it started as one thing and became another. I think in a simple way, the film is basically just a sort of a reimagining or a recreation or recreating of our memories. And I kind of like think of it as like, it's a little bit, one part of it's a little bit like detective work, you know, like there's a scene where me and Anna, real life, me and her go back to the spot in a field where we lost our virginities together. And we discuss that on film. And then that's intercut with Leon and Georgia, the two actors who play us, then enacting that out. So there's this friction between me and Anna's discussion about what really happened, whether the grass was long, whether it was sunrise or whether it was the middle of the night. And then there's a friction there. And then there's this sort of friction between sort of drama and documentary. So you've got myself and Anna and existing in this documentary world, right alongside Georgia and Leon playing younger versions of ourselves, like living and existing in this dramatic world. And it became less about the detective work of them working out what really happened, but like the significance of what happened, not necessarily whether the grass was long or short, but more what's the outcome of doing all of this.
Right.
And less of a kind of like I think the more we were trying to grasp at the truth, the more we realized that like the truth kind of is potentially like an emotional truth has completely eclipsed what actually was true and what happened. So the way that you remember stuff is like the way that we remembered stuff was totally different for these kind of like massive moments that you'd then kind of solidified in your brain and thought, oh no, this is like definitely factually what happened.
So you were, sorry to interrupt, but that point you says, you were mentioning two types of truth. You was mentioning the truth in terms of almost like a sensory truth in terms of colours and smells and time of day, and then the emotional truth. And it sounds like you've, through going through this project together, you've managed to reveal what the emotional truth was. Is it at this point a shared idea of what this emotional truth is?
Good question. I mean, I think that's actually quite a pertinent one, just because I feel like, yeah, that just to further define those two layers, I guess, of truth, is like you have the kind of practical truth of things, which is a slippery thing, and when you're talking about memory, it becomes a very slippery thing, and something is actually impossible to grasp onto. And then you have an emotional truth, which is constantly in flux and ever changing and personal, but it can, and subjective, but there can be a shared subjectivity. And I think what I believe that one of the more sort of beautiful and poignant parts of what we've done and the film we've created is that we've attempted to cross a boundary that we all do as humans. And I think a lot of time art is about that. It's about crossing boundaries and being transgressive. And what we've tried to do is cross an emotional boundary and try and achieve some sort of shared emotional truth. I don't think it always slots into place and lines up perfectly, but I think personally what I've discovered through making this film is a new sides and new sort of emotional capabilities to myself as a person, and not just as, you know, someone making a film, but as a person. I've been on a journey in making this film and changed a lot emotionally, and I think Anna has too. And through that journey, I think there's moments where it became fractious and we became distant and it became very difficult and painful, but then there's moments of like incredible sort of closeness and intimacy. So that thing of like, has it always lined up? If that's the question, I would say no, but again, the process of doing it has been the attempt itself is the bit that's meaningful, I think. And I think that extends beyond like just what we're doing, but just like beyond.
I mean, that sounds like a really useful emotional practice that anyone can use, even if they're not an artist, is to be able to, especially with another person as well. Because when I read about February Montaine's work and his stories, he's doing it by himself. He's kind of splitting his emotional worlds up to different characters, and very, very rarely does there seem to be another character coming in to help each other. And what you've kind of done there is, I guess when you're in a relationship, it's you, the other person, and then this space in between. And that space in between is usually more important than the two constituent people. Like Anna, did you find this particularly inspirational for writing music as well?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting that you should say that, kind of like February working completely alone, because I had spent all of my like musical career just working on my own. I would write on my own, and then I would kind of present people with a completely finished thing. And I was really protective about it, and there were no outside influences that I would allow in, not on purpose, but just because I was really really uncertain of my own ability. So it was more like, oh, I can only show stuff to people if it's finished. And obviously the nature of making a film together is that you have to make the film in order for the film to then be there. So like I had to completely reassess the way that I created stuff. And me and Jem, and also our collaborator Henry, we did all of it all together from the offset, which was a very new thing for me, both like kind of work wise, like music wise and creativity wise, but also kind of emotionally. I'm not sure I'm really used to that. And yeah, I found it very, very fruitful in its confusion for me. So yeah, ended up writing a lot of stuff about it, and then also sharing that stuff about it, which was weird.
Nice. So you've got like a kind of multi-layered reality of your memories now. Like you've represented those memories through your conversations together. You've done it through the making of the documentary. You've done it through the casting of the people who played you. And then you've done it through all the offshoots, like the music that was inspired from it. So essentially you have navigated that particular time of your lives with more detail than most detectives would a crime case, to be honest. It feels very forensic. Are you going to be taking any of these methods onwards?
I mean, personally, I think, when it comes to filmmaking, particularly with documentaries, a lot of it is often detective work. And it's if you're making a very sort of, whether it's an issue-driven documentary or a very personal project, or a personal essay like this film kind of is, there's a lot of, what comes with that is a lot of examination. And I think I think in filmmaking, it's a very useful way of projecting your perspective, is like taking people on that journey with you as you examine something. And on a personal level, like this was an incredibly therapeutic tool for me in terms of like self-examination, in the sense that I could look at sort of research interviews we did years ago, 2.5 years ago, when we started making the film, look at that version of myself from 2.5 years ago and reflect on that, and then integrate that into like who I am as a person now. And they're in my mind, two very different people. And so that on just a personal level has been a really therapeutic and bizarre and useful tool for self-expression, but also like growth. So yeah.
What about you, Anna?
I mean, a lot of my stuff is very self-reflective and self-reflexive anyway. I think something that I will take a lot of in like going ahead in the future is just like working with other people, because working alone has a very specific set of kind of benefits and a specific set of drawbacks. And I find that for me as a human, having other people around who I trust and who I can kind of bounce ideas off, and who I like respect, and who I can see like grow and change, that's like fucking inspiring, and also really helps just in terms of like making something feel real, and kind of solidifying something real, which kind of makes it not real at all. But like it's very hard to understand that you're actually creating something when you're creating something completely on your own, because it doesn't feel like it's a thing until it's in the world. And also just not being as precious about my own ideas.
There's a February Montaine story about he kind of, when he was young, he heard about creative agencies, and he heard the two words together and his eyes lit up, and he thought, wow, it's amazing, like an agency that helps people be creative. And he tells this story of having a big director on the couch. You kind of get the idea it's Kubrick or something. And there's old Kubrick, and he's got creative block, and he goes under the sessions where February Montaine, he tries to understand where he's coming from, his psyche, these different kind of archetypes within him. And then he pores over this idea that Kubrick is stuck upon. And one time he does it, and he puts Kubrick under, and then Kubrick wakes up, and he's in this hangar, and all the actors are representing different facets of his personality. And there's smells there that conjure certain memories he told February Montaine during these sessions. And he's walking around this world, and every single person is cast to kind of react in a way for him to understand not just himself better, but the idea he was stuck on. And it feels like you guys have done something like that, but you've done it with one of the most important things anyone can experience, and that's your first love. And it's really, really beautiful, and I can't wait to see it. I wondered if you might kind of, for my birthday maybe, like do the same for me of this Zoom call.
Yeah, I've got someone in mind.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to upgrade myself massively again, but I've got someone in mind as well.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, guys.
Sam?
Thank you so much.
Earlier this week, I caught up with post-human artist Cynthia. Hello, Cynthia. Thanks for having me down here. It's certainly nice to get a little respite from the pandemic.
Hi, Sam. The pleasure is mine. Great to be here today speaking with you. It is an extremely important time for your species. Reaching out while reaching back in. I am watching closely.
I'm sure you are, Cynthia. It must be an intriguing time to be a post-human like yourself, especially as well-being is so integral to what you do.
Well-being for me is like your battery pack. You got to put fuel in the tank, so to speak. If the human being wants to overcome its collective hardships, collective and individual well-being is a must. The human is a very traumatized species. The way to overcome this is to remove the obstacles on the self, while simultaneously becoming and accepting the self. I look at collective experiences and how they can be portals to increased awareness between the self and others, including the non-human and the earth.
That's really nice that you've took February's ideas of fractal self-discovery and applied them not just to yourself but to the world around you. And I feel like it's almost similar to his empathy machine idea, which I believe you might have found on one of your research trips.
Oh yes, Mr. February Montaine. I am glad you brought this up. I have been lucky enough to be exposed to the late February's work, and it had a lasting impact on my art practice and myself. The jewelry I have been designing is directly related to this, as the idea that February had. I call them biosensitive wearables, or BSWs. They track and manage moods, body sensations and emotions via biofeedback collected from the BSW. Imagine it as a personal assistant to the body, helping optimize and adapt to changing physical and emotional landscapes.
So rather than technology being a distraction, it can be the thing that lets us understand more about ourselves. I love this idea of learning our emotional algorithms through other non-human algorithms. In here, it feels like you can create without gravity. What are your thoughts on utopian design, Cynthia?
Utopia is a tricky word. The Nazi Party would have called themselves utopian. I believe in researching and exploring with a positive and curious lens. We can guess at the future, but we can never know it. Our experiences work on chance and chaos. This is the only law of jungle, so to speak. An educated guess is the best humans can do, and with machine learning tech, humans can start to test these guesses in simulations in a digital environment.
Yeah, it is exciting to think of how much we can simulate these days, Cynthia. It reminds me of February Montaine's writings about better possible futures, and being able to use something like machine learning with his writing, it gives us an idea of all these different permutations of a future and different manifestations. What are your ideas on manifestation?
This is an interesting question, Sam. The human mind certainly manifests, that we can say with a degree of certainty. In the psychic realm, you are what you eat. Fill your mind with positive futures and dreams, and this is the future that will manifest. The human race's greatest challenge going forward is to re-fall in love with the human animal. To love yourselves and one another again.
Well, that's the dream here, Cynthia. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Sam. It's been a pleasure. Stay safe now.
I must admit, I didn't write these stories for you. Our world still chugs along at a slow enough speed for us to sit down in front of a book, take our time to look beyond the pages. Our world, as distracting as it may seem, still allows us the chance to dive into a story with ease. These short stories are less aimed at you, but at your grandchildren and their children. For those of a fizzing future where the whir of distraction is so incessant, they may never read a story like we do. With the technocopia all singing and dancing all day and night, the idea of a book will seem daunting. So as a means to try to resolve a problem not yet ready to fix, I offer these tiny tales. Each a glimpse into a world beyond. Little Lucy that cuts through the noise. February Montaine, 1983.
And now we got some letters in from the last program. So this one is from the real Alice Donovan, and she asks, "Where is February now?" Unfortunately, we don't know where February is now. He disappeared in 1991. He sent a tape back to the family, and it was as a travel video. It looked like it was around some kind of desert somewhere, and nobody has seen him since. So if anyone knows of his whereabouts, please let us know. Okay, and this one here, this one is from Shi Zhengli, and she asks, "I've been reading February's old partner Amelia's blog, and I'm finding it really touching. Is she going to appear on the program at all?" We have reached out. You're hearing Susie at the start, who's Amelia's daughter, but Amelia is very shy, so perhaps not. But if we have any words from her, we'll obviously relay them to you. Okay. And we have another question from Oja, and Oja is asking how I became aware of February. Well, I was lucky enough to meet Susie about 5 or 6 years ago now. Susie lived in a nearby village to me, sent me some music, and I can't say I was too hopeful. Most people's stepfathers make fairly tawdry music, but I was really amazed. And since then, it's spawned all this, I guess.